I haven't talked about this with very many people, except a few friends over beers late at night. But I figure it's getting close to Halloween, and there's no better time than now. It doesn't seem real, even now as I'm trying to relive the incident. I was in the Navy for 4 years, and I've seen a lot of strange things out in the middle of the ocean, but never anything like what I'm about to describe. One of the commands I was stationed at was on a coastal patrol boat in the Persian Gulf. Our primary task, among others, was to board fishing vessels and freighters to look for weapons, contraband, and narcotics. For security and privacy reasons, I won't reveal the vessel, crew members, or command names. One July evening in 2015, we were sailing in the northern portion of the Gulf, off the coast of Iran. We received a distress call from a freighter around 2200, or 10 at night, stating that he had spotted a fishing vessel not under power, meaning it isn't being driven, and drifting in the middle of a fairly populated shipping lane. He also stated that he had seen no lighting, signals, or ship's crew, which led him to believe it was abandoned. We took down the coordinates and arrived in the area a half hour later. Finding the ship was difficult, but we were able to locate it using NVGs, night vision goggles, and radar. Upon locating the vessel, we manned up one of our boarding teams, including myself, in an effort to climb aboard and sort out the situation. We had to be cautious. It isn't unheard of for ISIS and Taliban forces to rig trap boats for us to board and then detonate them. A few sailors were killed 2 years before my deployment in the same way. We boarded safely and began our search. My team of 3 were directed to check out the lower decks, which included the crew's quarters and the engine room. We didn't find a shred of evidence that any people had even been living on board, which is extremely strange. I've boarded a lot of boats, and most of the time these guys live on these things for weeks on end. And to be brutally honest, they don't smell very good, and are usually pretty messy because of the lack of fresh water for bathing, cleaning, or going to the bathroom. The crew's quarters were extremely clean and eerily empty, which gave me an odd feeling that this may be an ambush of some kind. I'm not an explosive ordnance and disposal tech, but we were all trained to look for explosives, just not to disarm them. After a thorough search for any signs of explosives which came up clean, we came to the conclusion that the crew may have transferred to another vessel if this one broke down mechanically. We searched the engine room for signs of scuttling, intentional flooding, unintentional flooding, or engine failure, and found no evidence of any of these. Our captain came over our headsets explaining that the only option we had based on the situation at hand was to rig the vessel for tow and haul it to the next port of call we were headed to. After securing the vessel to ours with heavy steel cable and a huge rope designed for this special purpose, we headed on a southerly course to continue our evening patrol. It's around 0300 in the morning and I'm on night watch with 2 other guys in the pilot house of our boat. We had a roving lookout that would walk around the top deck with a rifle and scan the water and sky for anything relevant. The lookout comes over the radio saying that he sees blue lights on and under the fishing boat we are towing. He says that he can see dark shapes moving around on the top deck, as well as through his night vision, and they look like people. He asks for one of us to come up and look, so I walk down and sure enough, I see the same thing he's seeing. Shadowy figures are walking around on the deck, and there are lights moving erratically around them and in the water around the boat. People are discernible through night vision. These figures look like shadows in the shape of people, almost transparent in a way. The scene was not something I can describe as I would like. I guess you'd have to have seen it for yourself to know what I mean exactly. I ran down to the captain's quarters to tell him what we were seeing, and have him come up and take a look. When he got to the aft end of the ship, and I'm not even exaggerating, right when we got there, a thick fog started to roll in and almost engulfed the entire area around us. It's hot in the Gulf, and the humidity does not produce a natural haze on the surface of the water at times, but this fog was unlike anything I had seen. It was like a white blanket, and all we could see was the starlight above and this fog closing in. We all just stood there not knowing what to say, honestly, our captain included. Before long, the fog had pretty much consumed the fishing boat, and we lost sight of it. The tow line suddenly became extremely tight, as if the fishing vessel was pulling in the opposite direction. This was dangerous because if that line snapped, it could hurt someone on deck because of the material it's made out of. Our captain shouted the order to break the tow rig. Before we could set to work unrigging it, the line just fell slack and dropped in the water. The fog was so thick now that I could barely see anything 20 feet in front of me. We hauled in the tow line to find it had been severed clean through. This line is designed to haul many tons and is extremely difficult to cut. It looked almost like it had been cut with a massive razor, it was so clean. Our captain never called in the incident, and his explanation was that the boat may have had stowaways that were hiding on board, and that's what we were seeing. We searched that boat from top to bottom, and I was there to witness it with my own eyes. There was nobody on board, and this wasn't the work of a stowaway crew playing some prank on the US Navy. I've never believed in ghosts or the paranormal, but I don't have any other way of explaining this incident other than that. We talked about it amongst ourselves for a few weeks, about the whole thing, and not too long after, we were notified that another patrol boat had seen something similar, not too far from where we had witnessed the incident. The phenomenon has become somewhat of an inside joke amongst the sailors and Marines of that area, and they are known as the Phantom Sailors of the Persian Gulf. Looking back on the situation now, I still can't believe it happened. It was surreal, and at the same time, so vivid. Like I said, I haven't really recited this story a whole lot, save with a few friends, because I know it sounds crazy. To this day, I'm not entirely sure what I saw, but I know I won't forget it for the rest of my life.
Can cats really see ghosts? My cat has been seriously creeping me out, and now I'm stuck in my room because of it. It started in the morning when my cat Pixie started to stare at one spot in my mom's bedroom. She would look at that spot before looking around as if something was moving. I casually made a joke about cats being able to see ghosts, but that was highly unlikely. Or was it? Nevertheless, my mom and I made the effort to move her bed and drawers to hoover the spot behind it as it had grown a large collection of dust. All the while, Pixie was behind and looking in that corner. It stopped for a while and we went on with the day. Later, as I was getting ready for bed, I found Pixie sat in the middle of my floor, looking under my desk and at the drawers under my bed, the exact same way she had done in my mom's room. My room is a little less tidy, to put it lightly, so it wouldn't be as easy to move everything. I picked her up and took her out of my room. I continued with getting ready to go to sleep as she continued to look at my now closed door. I went to go back into my room, and once again, Pixie tried to dart back in. I quickly closed the door too much for her to try to get in and put my foot in the way, to which she responded by trying to scratch it. Now I sit in my bed with Pixie meowing and scratching at the door, trying to get in, and it's seriously freaking me out. Because occasionally, not very often, I hear a noise from inside my room, like something dropping. Could it be that my cat can see a ghost that lives within our house? Or is it just the typical case of a cat being stupid?
When my parents go away, they always look to me to house sit. With 3 dogs, boarding them would cost almost as much as their actual trip. That might be an exaggeration, but you get the sentiment. I really didn't mind helping my parents out. They'd done so much for me. My only hesitation was staying in their large home, all by myself. Well, not all by myself. I'd have the dogs. It was my childhood home, so it should in theory feel comfortable. Unfortunately, I grew up terrified of the ghosts in my house. As far as hauntings go, it was pretty minor. No full-bodied apparitions, no disembodied voices, and no physical harm. It was mostly the feeling of being watched, and footsteps. Lots of footsteps. Things that go bump in the night. Despite getting up to investigate under my bed and in my closet, I never found anything. No green monsters hiding anywhere. When I was younger, I let myself get carried away with the idea of being haunted, but I outgrew those fears. There's no such thing as ghosts. My arrival at my parents' was met by a cacophony of barking, the dogs clambering all over themselves to be the first to greet me. Even though I didn't believe in ghosts, I was still comforted knowing that I had the dogs for protection. If ghosts did exist, animals were supposed to be more perceptive to their presence. They'd let me know if anything was amiss. It was a moot point, however, because ghosts do not exist. I settled in, raiding their cupboards and turning on Bob's Burgers. Cable was a luxury I did not have at home. I was foolish to have any trepidation about house sitting. It was about 9 p.m. when the footsteps started. They were coming from upstairs. I glanced at the dogs, all curled up and snoring soundly. Get a grip. There's no such thing as ghosts. Saying it out loud made me relax, the sound of my own voice cutting through the tension. Talking to myself out loud seemed so silly that it distracted me from the footsteps. I was slightly surprised my voice didn't rouse the dogs from their slumber, but they were lazy mutts most days. It was 9:15 when I heard a closet creak open. This happened a lot when I was a kid. My mom had a penchant for shopping and a tendency to overload our linen closet. "Hello?" I called out, feeling ridiculous for even playing into my fears. I waited in silence for a reply I knew would never come. And even if it did, what then? Would I take all the dogs to my tiny condo? And how could I abandon my post when my parents were trusting me to stay at their place? My mind was playing tricks on me. There's no such thing as ghosts, was my final word on the situation. I decided to mellow out the best way I knew how, with a nice mellow indica. I stepped outside to smoke a joint, once again surprised that the dogs made no motion to join me. Normally they were glued to my side when I came over. I guess the novelty of my presence had worn off. While outside, I thought I saw something dart past the window. It was dark, just a shadow. I'd seen things like this before. It was always when I got in my own head and convinced myself something otherworldly was happening. For fuck's sakes, there's no such thing as ghosts. I was done being gentle with myself. I was a grown-ass woman afraid of footsteps and shadows. Easily explained away as the house settling and my eyes playing tricks on me. I watched a few more episodes of the Belcher family and got lost in their antics. I had finally mellowed. Thanks for something, Trudeau. Bedtime, I called to the dogs, expecting them to follow me upstairs. They didn't budge. Whatever, I'd rather not have to share a king bed with all the hounds anyways. More room for me to stretch out. I couldn't help but feel I was being watched as I washed my face. You know that feeling of panic when you close your eyes while washing your face? That you might look up into the mirror and lock eyes with someone? That's what washed over me. Thankfully, when I looked into the mirror, all I caught was myself, looking sheepish. I looked hard at myself in the mirror. There's no such thing as ghosts. I laughed at myself. I felt like a kid again. How could such a self-assured, headstrong young woman like myself become a scared little child simply by entering my childhood home. I settled into bed, the weed helping pull me into a blissful haze, on the precipice of sleep. I was drifting, about to doze off, when the bells on the patio door chimed. My parents hung bells on the door that the dogs were trained to ring when they wanted out. It was pretty impressive, when it wasn't interrupting my beauty sleep. I booked it downstairs, not wanting to deal with any accidents. To my surprise, all 3 dogs were exactly where I had left them. The bells must have rung from the wind. I trudged up to bed, turning off all the lights as I went. I settled into bed once again, determined to sleep. I started to count sheep, and was once again awoken by a jarring sound. It was the sound of the bedroom door creaking. I had left it ajar, knowing the dogs would eventually join me. I felt the dog climb on the bed, just one of them. It must have been Stanley. He was handsome, but overweight. The foot of the bed sagged under his weight. Determined to sleep, I kept my eyes closed and rolled onto my side. I felt his breath. At the same time, his hand slid over my mouth forcefully. I think he was trying to stifle my scream, which was unnecessary given that sheer terror robbed me of my voice. "You're absolutely right," his hot breath in my ear. "There's no such thing as ghosts."
The house. This house, it felt normal at first, but the farther I ventured in, the more distorted the reality of the place became. The walls were too clean, but even the bleach couldn't remove the memory stains. They penetrated far too deep. The overhead halogen lights flickered slightly, and it was silent enough to hear the energy pass through them. The sound of it, although faint, was enough to drive anyone past the brink of sanity, and in this place, it was a fine line. The feelings of other began seeping into me. I started to feel something inside of my chest, the same thing I always feel when an entity is close by, subtle at first, then pulsing with urgency. I entered the kitchen and the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. I could feel her. She was just inches behind me, and I could feel the heat of anger emanating from her like a sun blazing from within. I couldn't move, fear paralyzing me. I felt her eyes drill straight into the back of my head. Finally, I broke through the fear and reeled around to face her. She stood before me, this once woman, her brown hair atop her head and a tousled braided bun, her facial features muted like a worn old porcelain doll. She was dressed in a long, flowing velvet and lace gown, and she hovered, her bare feet limp, inches from the ground. Her eyes like black voids. I tried to gasp, but she stole the air from my lungs. I couldn't breathe, and as I stared up at her, I could feel my life draining from my body. At last, I broke free of her grasp. I ran from the kitchen, trying desperately to get out of the house. I could feel them all now. They were everywhere in this place, and everything in me said, "Get out now." I ran down the long, wide hallway, trying every door I came upon, but I was lost in this labyrinth of a house. The hallways changed every time I tried to escape. The vengeful spirits had no intention of letting me go. I could feel their hate, pure black and soul deep. I could feel it in every cell of my being. I enter room after room, but to no avail. Things are flying off the shelves, doors open and slam over and over again, creating a deafening cacophony. The walls shake, and I can't find the exit.
Greetings, Insidious Nebula here. I really hope you enjoyed this tiny collection of Reddit ghost stories. It was my first collaboration with another narrator, and it was a lot of fun to make. Speaking of which, huge shout out to Mistress of Creepypasta for agreeing to do this. I cannot thank her enough. Make sure you check out her channel and show her some love. She's super talented and deserves it. Also, make sure you check out the description for all of the links to the original stories and the awesome authors that gave us permission to use their stories. We couldn't really, made the video without them. I haven't really done one of these outros in a while. I've mainly been getting used to putting out content on a regular basis. I hope to be able to do that consistently now. I have a few more stories that are in the works that will be getting their own feature uploads, so look forward to those. Also, I'm really close to 100 subs, which is just amazing. I never expected something that I started out doing as a hobby to get this sort of following, so it really means a lot. So thank you all. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope that you have enjoyed this collaborative dredge through the darkness.